recognizing what tilling does and deliberately limiting how much tillage occurs.
Meaning there's a tractor that's turning over the earth?
Digging up the earth, exactly. Perhaps to grind cover crops into it, which releases carbon, which we don't want.
And it destroys the microbiome that's there, all the microbial life.
The new vision for a beautiful vineyard is rows of well-maintained grapevines with a tremendous diversity of life, not only growing, but living within it, that it is its own little biosphere.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 237. What does regenerative viticulture mean? How do healthy vineyards today look dramatically different from those 5 years ago? And how did the Wine Olympics make the results of the Judgement of Paris undeniable? In today's episode, you'll hear those stories and tips that answer those questions in part 2 of my chat with Dr. Mark Gudgel about his new book, The Rise of Napa Valley Wineries, How the Judgement of Paris Put California on the Wine Map. You don't have to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but I hope you'll go back if you missed it after you finish this one. Now, a quick update on my memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. I'm just back from an amazing launch event in Halifax, where I reconnected with a lot of relatives, former Highland dancing students, and friends. And it was just so life-affirming to go back to my roots and the people I knew in my childhood. I grew up in Lower Sackville, just outside of Halifax, and my parents are from Cape Breton. And this coming Monday at 6:30 p.m., I'll be hosting a second launch event in Ottawa at Le Cordon Bleu. There are just a few tickets left. The first event on May 31st at Le Cordon Bleu was a blast. The food and wine, of course, were spectacular. I'll post a link in the show notes where you can register for the June 19th event. If you've read the book, I would love to hear from you at natalie@nataliemclean.com. If you haven't got your copy yet and would like to support it and this podcast, please order it from any online book retailer, no matter where you live. Every little bit helps spread the message. I'll put a link in the show notes to all the retailers worldwide at nataliemclean.com/237. Here's a review from Emily Silva Hoekstra, who lives in the United States. Quote, Natalie does an excellent job talking about the pressures of the wine industry, especially as a woman. I worked in the wine industry for 5 years and found myself resonating with much of the book. There is a push to indulge heavily while also proving yourself as one of the guys. I'm so happy she shines a light on this issue. Thank you, Emily. Okay, on with the show. So tell us a bit more about how the book progresses. I think we've gotten up to the early pioneers like Robert Mondavi. Then where do you take the story?
Yeah, so what really happens, right, if that tasting had been a one-off, right, then you'd have all these people. I personally find the whole root day, leaf day thing annoying. But I
What is
think,
this?
It's part of biodynamics, but they'll say if a wine isn't tasting well, they'll blame it on the position of Venus or something like that. I'm not trying to be too flippant, but it's nonsense,
Okay.
in my personal opinion. But I think that it had been a one-off. People would have blamed it on a root day or blamed it on the judges. They must have had hot coffee beforehand, or the Chablis that they tasted to awaken their palates must have been tainted with, TCA or God knows what. People would have made something up and written it off. But the thing is, after the Judgment of Paris, it just happened again and again and again. And that was really a lot of the impetus for me writing the book. So you had asked me to share a wine with you today, and I will. But I would like to share, if I may, a passage from my book that
Yes.
kind of exemplifies this. It's about an event that took place very shortly thereafter. And again, there are many of these, and I tried to write about them all. This is from an event called the Olympiade du Vin, the Wine Olympics. Okay.
Okay.
By 1979, the Napa Valley was brimming with people who relocated to wine country to seek their fortunes in wine. Some sought new careers, some investments, some vanity projects. But those like Stu and Charlie, the old guard, who, alongside Chelyshev, Stewart, Gergich, Barrett, Davies, Heitz, Winiarski, the Mondavis, and many others, had beat the rush, simply continued to do what they'd always done, making great wine in the beautiful place they felt fortunate to call home. So this is about Stu and Charlie Smith of Smith Madrone, I've already mentioned. One Sunday evening during harvest, Stu remembers being up a ladder at the top of the tank when the phone rang. He climbed back down the ladder to get it. A friend spoke excitedly on the other end of the line. "My mom just got back from Europe," he told Stu, "and she brought the International Herald Tribune with her." Stu waited patiently for the story to get more interesting. After a moment, the friend blurted out, "You won! The Riesling competition, Stu! You and Charlie won!" In the future, the gravity of this information would not be lost on the Smiths. But in the moment, after yet another 17-hour workday, Stu just wanted to climb back out the ladder so that he could finish his work and get home. "Great," he said wearily. "Send it to me." The tasting, put on in 1979 by Gaumieau, comparable to the Michelin Guide, and touted as the Olympiade du Vin, the Wine Olympics, was a truly international affair that far exceeded anything Spurrier or Gallagher ever envisioned. Gaumieau had declined to cover the Paris tasting, but had certainly taken note of the results. The Judgement of Paris had raised questions. Gaumieau now sought to answer them. In the Wine Olympics, hundreds of wines from around the world were tasted by expert judges, and the results again were stunning to those who had managed to convince themselves the Judgement of Paris was somehow a fluke. If Napa had failed to capture anyone's attention, the Olympiade du Vin surely succeeded in doing so. As Stu's friend had attempted to impress upon him, Smith Madrone came in first in the world in Riesling, up against the best of Germany, France, and others. "It wasn't only the Smiths who triumphed. You must be mistaken," replied Janet Trefethen into the receiver, and then her mood darkened. "If this wasn't a mistake, perhaps it was some kind of rude joke." "I assure you I am not mistaken," said the voice on the other line. "Your 1976. It has been named the best Chardonnay in the world by Gaumieau." Janet was teeming with questions. When did this occur? Who organized it? And most of all, how in the hell did a bottle of her wine get to France? Nobody had contacted the Trefethens about entering a competition. The whole thing seemed strange. But if Chateau Montelena and Stag's Leap wine cellars could do it, then why not Trefethen? She thanked the caller and hung up the phone.
Oh, it's great. You are a great storyteller. I'm so glad you suggested reading a passage because I was just leaning in going, oh,
Thank you so
great
much.
Story. Yes.
It really is a great story. I was really honored to be able to tell these stories because I think they're important. And this is maybe where my book adds to what Tabor already contributed.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. If you can weave that all together. And then as the book continues, where do you take it?
So subsequent tastings continue to occur and the Americans continue to win to the extent that it gets boring, it gets predictable. I think if you've got truly credentialed judges and you taste the best of American wines alongside the best of French, the Americans typically win. And of course, I'm a homer, right? I'm an American, so I kind of lean in on that a little bit, but these are my jam for sure. Then it gets tougher. If you've never been, Silicon Valley is hell on earth. It is just a concrete hell of strip malls. And it used to be beautiful. And there are places, if you work hard enough, where you can still find beauty. But then there were people in Napa who went, that's not going to happen here. And they fought like hell to make sure it didn't. One person I've become acquainted with recently, working on my next book, is Ren Harris. He and his wife, Marilyn, who is a Palissa, who are an old family in the valley, did so much to ensure that the valley would not get taken over. And the Davies worked so hard and still do. Jack and Jamie's son, Hugh, still works so hard. And there were many, many others, the Trefethens, who we just mentioned in the book. And, I feel rude for not bringing up everyone, but there are hundreds of people who just went, no, we're not going to pave the Napa Valley. California wanted to build an interstate up Highway 29. And it was this small group of citizens who went, hell no, that isn't going to happen. And they're the
Sure.
reason that this place is still so beautiful.
Yeah, because there's all kinds of laws about not building up on the mountains, like keeping the trees there.
Absolutely. And not building vineyards up there. Volker Isley's another one. Randy Dunn, these people that worked so hard to protect the hillsides, protect the riparian corridors. And so the book goes into that, goes into the threat of fire today and climate change and the work of Napa Green. Napa Green is, I think, an extraordinary organization that was founded by the Napa Valley Vintners, but today is independent and works so hard to try to not only sustain the earth, but they're now focusing on regenerative viticulture, which I think is just so important and really groundbreaking. And if they can do it in Napa, then they'll set the tone, right? Then we can all do it, right? Then it can be done in Chile and everywhere else.
Tell us about the regenerative efforts that they're doing. What does that mean, especially as it relates to Napa?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's such a diverse topic that Napa Green, I would encourage everybody to get on their website and check them out. They've got these 6 pillars of sustainability that are really worth looking into. One of which is to do with social justice, which I think is hugely important, right? We've always known that, the most important people in wine were often being paid the least and treated the worst. Now, there have been people who have absolutely fought against that. Back in the 70s, Ren Harris, who I mentioned, who founded Paradigm, put together an insurance company to make sure that health insurance could be held by vineyard workers. This was a really progressive idea at that time, and frankly still is today, because if you want to mistreat people, you still could. But I think many in Napa are united against that. But Napa Green and regenerative viticulture, I was at a conference last week, and they were showing us this massive drone that could fly over and drop bugs, which were dormant because they'd been refrigerated. And they were dropping these bugs on the vineyards of Charles Krug and, spreading them. I mean, the things, what sheep can
Good
contribute.
bugs, I assume.
Good bugs. Yes, exactly. Yeah. But what sheep can contribute to vineyards, right? And what no-till practices can do for vineyards, no-till or low-till, right? I think it's a little naive to say that you're never going to till anything if you're a farmer. But recognizing what tilling does and deliberately limiting how much tillage occurs, right?
And tilling meaning there's a tractor that's turning over the earth?
Digging up the earth, exactly. Perhaps to grind cover crops into it or something like that, which releases carbon, right? Which we don't want.
Right.
We don't need that.
It destroys the microbiome that's there, all the microbial
absolutely.
Life.
Kills it. And so, there used to be this I think vision of a beautiful vineyard, which was rows of manicured grapevines with earth in between them. And I think that the new vision for a beautiful vineyard is rows of well-maintained grapevines with a tremendous diversity of life, not only growing, but living within it. And that it is its own, little biosphere, so to speak.
Sure. Sounds more beautiful.
Private
garden with wildlife and And so how is California dealing with climate change? Is that in your book as well?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
And it's, a fair bit. Slowly, which is tough when you feel like something's urgent. But I was speaking with a winemaker I really respect the other day who was counseling caution and saying, look, rushing into these things does not work. And I do think she's got a point. But, there's a lot that we can do. I think that, especially with Napa Green, we've recognized that we're past the point of sustainability. If we, as I wrote in my book, if we resign ourselves to merely sustaining where we are, we have resigned ourselves to a long, slow death. We have to regenerate. But the good news is I think we can. And so I think that's what we're looking at. And I think that Napa Valley and many there are truly leading the way.
Okay. So was there anything that surprised you while you were researching or writing the book?
A lot. And some of those things were fun little bits of trivia, and some of them were not so fun. So I asked Bernard Portet what I thought was an obvious question. He indicated to me that maybe it was the first time he'd ever been asked. But he made the wine at Clos du Val. And, of course, his wine won the 1986 tasting, and he's still involved at Clos du Val today. But the vintage that was entered into the 76 tasting was, I believe, a 72, which was the first vintage of Clos du Val. And of course, if they opened their winery, then they didn't grow those grapes. And so I said, Bernard, where did you get the grapes? And it seemed like the most obvious question, but again, I don't know that he'd been asked that before. And he told me where he got them, and it was a blend of 85% Cabernet Sauvignon, 15% Merlot. And I thought it was great because he says, well, the Cabernet Sauvignon we got, I'm not going to impersonate his French accent, I just wish you could hear him. He said, we got it up the road here at what was then something else, and today I believe is Elevet. He said we bought that from them. And he says, and the Merlot? And he kind of looks into the air. He goes, I don't remember where I got that. and I just thought that was hilarious. Like, this is arguably one of the more important wines that's ever been made. We don't know where the Merlot came from, but we know it was good. We know the winemaker was very talented, and still is. But then there were other things. There are people who are sort of apologetic. There's one particular writer who kind of praises George Yount, who I think was a real scoundrel.
Praises who?
George Yount, whom Yountville is named after. He had the first Rancho Camus. He was the first Americano granted a Mexican rancho, and that it was 12,000 acres of the middle of Napa Valley. So, he gifted some to his son-in-law as a dowry, which became Rutherford, and so there's some real history there. But a lot of these folks were real tiresome lowlives, if I may.
How is he a scoundrel? What's the dirt on him?
Well, it's so interesting because, again, there's this one writer, and I don't know the guy. He's been dead for 100 and some years, 150 probably. But, there's one writer who's like, well, by all accounts, he was pretty good to the native population. And then there are other writers who literally have written that he had Wapo people scalped.
Oh.
He's just one of many. Edward Turner Bale, whom the Bale grist mill is named after because he had it put in. Bale was a monster, and the Berryessa brothers, who Lake Berryessa was named after, probably enslaved native populations, And so some of it, it's like, you kind of know some of these things, but when you start actually reading, you just go, gosh, and we still have stuff named after him. But I drove through Custer State Park last year. We still have things named after Custer? My God. And Columbus, I have a friend who's a wine lover who just moved to Columbus, Nebraska. I'm like, why is anything named after that guy? He's just famous for getting lost, And so I just, yeah. And no scruples. But, it's just, I don't know. Some of that stuff's annoying. And then it's more than annoying. It's disgusting. But then you look at Napa today, or you look at the wine industry today. There are 4 Black master sommeliers in the world, I believe. I know that there are 4 African Americans. I don't know because the Court of Master Sommeliers in Europe is separate from the Court of Master Sommeliers in America.
Okay.
I'm only really acquainted with the Americas. But yeah, there are 4. 4, right? Only 10% of master sommeliers are women. And certainly not because of inferior palates or any nonsense like that, right? So we got a long ways to go. There is one Black woman winemaker in Napa. And she's extraordinary, but she shouldn't be alone. So
what needs to change to make that progress?
Well, first, I think we have to talk about it, which is why I made sure to make it a part of a book that it would have been easy to leave it out of, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one was going to press me too hard on why I didn't write about climate change or racial inequity or women's rights in a book on the Judgement of Paris. People would have left me alone about that, but I didn't want to be left alone. I wanted to bring it up. It's important. And it needs to be dealt with. And so I think we need to talk about it. And then we need to actually do things, right? There's some great groups out there, the Roots Fund, Badass Women of Wine, Batonage Forum, and others that are, I think, working to try to make those strides. And then there are brilliant winemakers. We mentioned Zelma Long, of course, but, Sally Johnson, Carmel Greenberg, some really amazing women making wine right now who I think very clearly demonstrate this can be done, and more of them all the time. The winemaker Farniente I met last week is a brilliant woman, and there are many others.
Is there anything you've discovered since you wrote the book that you would add to a new edition?
There's, interestingly, this history continues. And so I do look forward to writing about tastings that come after, in which I would predict the results will remain consistent. There will be evolution in the wine trade in matters of climate change. I could have done more about climate change and how it's being addressed. So the timing was sort of fortuitous that my book had not yet come out when Spring Mountain Vineyards filed for bankruptcy, but there will be more story there as we see what occurs next, which I don't know. Mike Gudgel just turned 100 years old, but of course that was in April, and so we didn't, have the opportunity to. There wasn't much about that in the book. Stu and Charlie are still making wine up on Spring Mountain. Volker Isley's son, Alexander, and Catherine still run Volker Isley Family Estate. And people are just doing incredible things, and they're all worth talking about, which is, my publisher gave me 48,000 words. I wrote 90, and we edited it down to about 54, I think. So there's more to say.
What's your greatest satisfaction in having written this book?
The people that tell me I got it right. And that's not everybody, of course. But so many people have read my book and written kind reviews. Bella Spurrier was quite complimentary, which meant a lot to me because, of course, her husband is an integral part of this story. So, yeah, I think those things, knowing that maybe I told an important story or maybe even more than one.
And where is your ideal place to have a glass of wine?
With friends.
Uh-huh.
The where is less important than the company. There are restaurants that I love. I love to drink a glass of wine walking through the vineyard, in particular with friends of mine who may have made it or had a part in making it. But I had a glass of Riesling and a glass of Cabernet, actually from Oakville, in my living room with a couple of our best friends and my wife last night, and that was wonderful too.
Huh. Well, you keep teasing us with this Riesling that you've got there, so let's talk about it, Mark.
Okay.
So
I'm going to pull it out of my fridge here in my office.
Yes, please do. And I'm going to bring on while we're waiting, my big red from Camus.
Yeah.
Yes.
Camus. So Camus is named after Rancho Camus, which was the name of the rancho founded by George Yount.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No extra charge for that.
Okay, thank you. So your vintage of this Riesling, is it recent or is it older?
This is a 2017.
Oh.
Again, these age brilliantly. So I've had the 22.
Okay.
Just very recently. In fact, I visited this winery last week.
Mm-hmm.
But, they're ageless. I haven't had anything back from the 80s, but they were making it, and I hope to eventually. But, yeah, this is so... I mentioned I was at dinner recently in Omaha with two different master sommeliers, and I brought that 20-year-old bottle of Cabernet from Smith Madrone. And because I did that at this restaurant, this extraordinary little restaurant, which actually is where the introduction to my book is set in Omaha, they said, well, should we try the Smith Madrone Riesling since we're going to drink the Cab? And I said, absolutely. And it was the first time they had it, and they were so blown away by it. Huh. This is as good as any Riesling in the world by all accounts. It is perfect, I think.
Is it a dry Riesling?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a German style. It's always relatively low alcohol. The 2017 here is, well, I know it's against the law not to put it on the label. 12.9% alcohol, which is, not low for a Riesling, but low for any American wine.
Sure.
Look at that color. It's beautiful, just gorgeous.
Color.
And the bouquet, just...
What do you get?
Well, the first thing that's so noteworthy is this telltale petrol, right? The petroleum that we know comes off of these great Grand Cru, Premier Cru Rieslings.
What does that come from, in your opinion, the petrol smell? And some people think that's a negative, but I personally love that smell. It reminds me of summer at the cottage and an outboard motor and the water and everything.
Yeah. I am not adept enough at winemaking that I want to speculate. I know that if you called up Stu and Charlie, or many other people, they could tell you immediately what's causing their wine to smell like that. But
sure.
I just know I like it. And then it leads quickly into some really beautiful stone fruits, as well as a little bit of tropical fruit, green apple. It's complex and beautiful and perfect with food. This is the white wine I would gladly pair with steak, but...
Why do you think it works with steak? Because people wouldn't typically think of Riesling with steak.
I never had either. I have a good friend who's an advanced somm who throws some kind of tasting ideas my way frequently and pairing ideas. And one of them is Syrah with Indian food, which You would think this massive, meaty wine typically is probably going to struggle with those sauces, right? No, 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 no. Order a smorgasbord of Indian food and open your favorite Syrah and just be prepared to be blown away.
Wow.
But another is a nicely aged Riesling with steak. And I don't know why it works. Doesn't make any sense to me at all, but it's because most things other than Napa Cab don't hold up to steak.
Yeah.
This
Well,
will.
maybe it's the caramelization of the steak and the petrol of the wine. There's kind of something there in common, because I do find sometimes a buttery Chardonnay will work with a caramelized steak because of the common notes or whatever. But yeah, I'm with you. I love the petrol. Some say it comes from the nature of the grape. Some say from the soils or the age. As it ages, it gets more petrol-y, but I'm a big fan of it. You could call it flinty or stony if you wanted to. But.
Me too. It's funny because people, I don't know, we need to remember that our preferences are only that, right? And if you don't like Brettanomyces, then don't buy those wines. But don't
Right, the
beat
barnyard
up.
kind of smell.
Yeah. I mean, all of Randy Dunn's old Cabernets, up until like 2004, have really heavy notes of Brett. But they're famous for a reason, right? They're glorious. They're so good. And if you don't like that, then don't buy them because they're not cheap. But don't tell us that it's a flaw, for goodness sake.
Speaking of the price, what's the cost of that, or a current vintage of that Riesling? What would it be approximately?
I want to say 35. It'll depend a little on where you're at. Of course, the restaurant will mark it up more, but yeah, it's not dramatic. It's a really reasonably priced wine.
It's affordable, yeah, for a great wine.
Yeah.
Obviously. That is amazing. So, I mean, the time has flown, but I'd love to do a few quick questions and answers, the lightning round with you, Mark, if you're game.
I'm having so much fun. I'm in.
Okay, cool. What's the last great book you read?
Well, I mentioned And the Mountains Echoed, and I absolutely loved it, but I didn't read that recently. I'm reading Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows to my son right now, which brings me great joy. And I reread Born to Run recently, which I think everyone's a runner. Some people don't realize it, but the answer to every question for me is go for a run. I'm feeling happy. Good. Go for a run. I need to think. Good. Go for a run. I'm sad. Perfect. Go for a run. I'm tired. Go for a run. I have a lot of energy. Go for a run. And I think Born to Run reinforces that idea because that's how we survived and Neanderthals didn't, is we're long distance runners. So.
Well, getting all kinds of history. That's fascinating. Is there something that you believe about wine with which some people might disagree strongly?
Oh, absolutely. Many things. But I think the most important, people ask me all the time, what's great wine? And my answer never varies. Whatever you like, just so long as you can afford it. So, I'm sure Petrus is a great wine, but someone asked me the other day what I thought of Petrus, and I laughed at them. Oh, never had Petrus. You know why I've never had Petrus? Because I can buy 1.5 cases of Paradigm Cabernet Sauvignon for the cost of 1 bottle of Petrus. And I love Paradigm Cabernet. But having said that, drink what you want and don't, goodness gracious, if people want to get judgmental, that's their issue. If people want to get, people are pretentious and snobby about wine, go away. That is just that's not what this community is about, man. Like, drink what you like, learn new things, always try the new wine. I've been doing a lot of work in the Balkans lately. Best Syrah I've ever had in my life was made in Montenegro. I've spent a lot of time drinking Syrah in Washington State. The best Syrah I've ever had in my life was made in Montenegro. Just try new stuff, enjoy it, and be confident enough to go, well, I like this, so I'm drinking it.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell us about a favorite childhood food that you loved and what you would pair it with in terms of wine today.
Well, I'm afraid I was a big fan of McDonald's as a child, but you can't fix, I can't fix that anymore. Yeah, I know. My children too. I passed it on to them, the poor things. They love Happy Meal. So I really, really enjoy steak. I'm from Nebraska. This is beef country. And in my mind, there is nothing better than Cabernet Sauvignon with a well-done steak, specifically Napa Cabs. They're big and robust and stand on their own, but they're so beautiful with that steak. I just love it.
Yeah, it's a great match. Do you have a favorite wine gadget?
I've got a lot that I think are really silly. I don't feel like I should probably sit here and malign $500 corkscrews, right? But I have been saving up. I don't have one yet, but there's that corkscrew / Osso right? That opens old
Oh,
bottles. And I'm
oh
good with an
yes, with the
also.
tongs. I
Uh-huh.
think it
Yeah,
is.
the also
Yeah,
has the tongs, and then
yeah.
this thing has a corkscrew as well. So you screw the corkscrew down, and then you work the also around it, and it always perfectly removes the cork. They cost a couple $100, but if you're drinking old wine, I think it's worth it. So I'm
Yes.
excited about that, but I'll admit that I don't own one yet.
Oh, that's all right. They are useful. I just got one recently because they squeeze those old corks, which can easily fall apart because they're
Hmm.
so dry.
Yeah, you don't have to shove more than one old cork into a bottle that you were excited about to go, okay, we need to figure this out.
Yeah. So if you could share a bottle of wine with anyone outside the wine world, living or dead, who would that be and which bottle would you open and what would you ask them?
Outside the wine world. Well, I'm going to get a little sentimental. I honeymooned in Napa. My wife has stopped drinking alcohol, which is a great choice for her. It's good for her health. She doesn't try to inflict that upon me. She's great about it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we honeymooned in wine country in 2013, and my cellar is full of 2013s.
Huh.
And if one day she and I could pull the cork on one of those and just drink it and spend that time together, just one glass of wine, I would love to have that one more time.
Oh, that's nice. That's great. And if you could put up a billboard in downtown San Francisco, what would it say?
I just photographed a billboard in downtown San Francisco that I thought
Oh,
was really remarkable. And one of the things is that the billboards in downtown San Francisco are all about technology that you don't need. It's really annoying. So I photographed the one billboard I've seen in San Francisco that I thought was meaningful, and I will read it to you.
okay.
I could paraphrase it, but I can just pull up my Instagram here where I posted
Sure.
it. And I just pulled up my Instagram, and you are the top hit. Wine Witch on Fire. Your book comes out the day after mine, and I can't
That's right.
wait to read it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so here it is. It says, "Hey, San Francisco, this is a sign you're not doing enough to fight anti Semitism." And
Huh.
it's this massive, I don't know if it'll show up here, but it's this big billboard that I photographed off the
Okay.
interstate. And
Yeah.
we're not, you know, we're not doing enough to fight anti Semitism. We're not doing enough to fight racism. We're not doing enough to empower women, but we could be. And so, damn it, let's get a move on.
Yeah, that's a good message. It's a good pattern interrupt. Which wine would you want to serve at your funeral? Not to get morbid, but
No, it's fine. All of them.
all of them?
We'll see what my children wind up enjoying, you know. I mean, if they're wine drinkers, they can have my collection. I have a nice cellar. But if they're not, pull the corks. You know,
Sure.
I've got a lot of great wine down there that I'm probably not going to get to, and I just want people to have a good time.
Lovely. I want to be invited. Not that I want you to kick off anytime soon, but
It's the
sounds
first
like a
time
good
anybody's
party.
ever said, "I'd like to be at your funeral." Like, oh,
Yes.
thank you.
It's going to be a good one. As we wrap up our conversation, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to mention, Mark?
So much. I love talking about wine. I could do this all day, but I'll just add the project I'm working on now is a book about Oakville. And Oakville is one of the nested AVAs in the Napa Valley, right? It is where Robert Mondavi opened his winery. It's where the Tocolon Vineyard is. And so many important wineries and important people more so are there. That's where Ren Harris is. My friends Barry and Jennifer Waite are in Oakville. The Nickel family set up shop in Oakville. So many. It's such an extraordinary place, and it's very, very small, but so rich with history. I got to spend just a little time recently with Graham and Sarah McDonald, with Bonnie, the founder of Silver Oak, and Lisa, and, you know, so many terrific people. And now I get to tell their stories, and
Huh.
I'm really excited about what comes next.
That's great. Do you have a projected publish date for that one, or you're still sort of in the middle of it?
We're at the front end of it right now.
Okay.
And there are a lot of stories to tell. So it's going to take a while. But yeah, that's Oakville is where Nils Vengi made the first wine ever to earn 100 points in the United States. You know, it was the 85 Groth Cabernet Sauvignon. I drink more of their Merlot because I can afford it. But, you know, yeah, it's just the stories. It's so much fun.
Oh, that's terrific. So where can people get in touch with you, find you and your book online, and show your book again on the video, please,
Yeah,
so we can all get a good look
absolutely.
at it again?
So
Because it's
there it
available for
is.
pre-order now, but it'll be published by the time this episode is published. So,
Yeah. So I
yeah.
would encourage you to go to your small family-owned neighborhood bookstore, whether that's the Napa Book Mine or the Plains Trading Company or the Bookworm or any other, and pre-order it. You
Yes.
can pre-order it on Amazon, but of course, I think the former option is superior. But wherever you buy it, I'll be glad that you did. And you can track me down. I'm actually working on markgudgel.com right now. It was up
Okay.
and I realized I didn't love it, so we took it down and we're tinkering with it. And I have some friends helping me. But you can track me down. Check out Vin Nebraska, VIN Nebraska, so 2 N's in there. And you
Okay.
can reach me through that. And I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter, unfortunately, still, and I'm on Instagram, which I kind of enjoy. So Mark Gudgel there, Gudgel. So please, track me down. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk wine with anybody who wants to.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
People are scrambling to remember what those were. All right, Mark. Well, I raise my glass to you. Here's to the success of your book and
Thank
your
you.
launch.
And yours.
Congratulations. And I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I will say goodbye for now, but don't hang up.
Thank you. Thank you. I won't. I appreciate it, Natalie. It's really been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Great chat. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Mark. Here are my takeaways. Mark's definition of regenerative viticulture was really helpful. I especially like his observation that the new vision for a beautiful vineyard is rows of well-maintained grapevines with tremendous diversity of life living within them. Number 2, I agree with him that if we resign ourselves to where we are in the wine industry, we have resigned ourselves to a long, slow death. Number 3, I enjoyed his story about how the Wine Olympics made the results of the Judgement of Paris undeniable. And 4, it's also undeniable that the wine industry has a long way to go with just 4 African American master sommeliers, and only 10% of master sommeliers are women. In the show notes, you'll find the full transcript of my conversation with Mark, links to his website and books, the video versions of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live, and where you can order my memoir online now, no matter where you live. That's all in the show notes at natalie@nataliemaclean.com/237. Email me if you have a sip, tip, or question at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. If you missed episode 42, go back and take a listen. I chat with the popular Food Network host, Kevin Broch, about his travels in the wine world. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
There's a lack of bravery around wine for people that don't know about wine. Just remember in the room, it was like, what does it taste like? And people are afraid to say cotton candy.
Right.
But we know that that's one of the culinary descriptors, or candy in and of itself. Earth, wet leaves, we know all of these things. People are afraid to say them for the first time.
Yeah.
And yet, once you do, you're so empowered. The wine tastes to you like the wine tastes to you. I can read the label. I can read what Robert Parker thinks of this wine.
Mm-hmm.
I can read what Billy Munnelly, who I adore and love, thinks of this wine.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I'm only left with me. It's daunting. Nobody says that with beer. Like, guys don't drink beer and go, I get a little bit of the hops from the seashore by Seattle and the nose of dog hair.
If you liked this episode, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines, tips, and stories we shared. You won't want to miss next week when I chat with Carolyn Hurst, president of Westcott Vineyards in Niagara, Ontario. Since 2017, she has been the chair of the Ontario Craft Wineries, representing more than 100 wineries in the province. We talk about the issues facing the Ontario wine industry, as well as her personal and colorful experiences in the business. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week, perhaps a buttery California Chardonnay. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.